Hey there, beautiful people. So what I want to do is I built this folding workbench that's right here, and I want to give you kind of a rundown of what it looks like, how it works, and then give you some focus areas of like how I built this, the legs, or how I got it to fold. So let me demonstrate how it comes down first, and then we'll put it back up, and I'll zoom in so that you can see different parts of it. So taking down is actually really easy. So you unfold the legs, 1, 2. This crossbar here is used to help stabilize the legs. So that goes in here. That keeps the legs from collapsing in on you when you take it down. This little piece of wood just turns here on the top, and that's what's holding it up against the wall. And then it comes down like this and rolls away. Now I can roll it to any part of my garage, or I can send it out into the driveway and put work out there if I wanted to. I also installed, you can't see it because it's off camera, but this retractable extension cord into my roof joist of my garage, so that now I have electricity anywhere in the garage that I need to pull it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back up against the wall so you can see how easy it is to put it back up against the wall, and then I'll bring you a little bit closer and show you how I made different parts of this project. It is on the heavy side, so this is for people who have a little bit of arm strength. I'd say it probably weighs about 50, 60 pounds when it's all said and done, maybe 70. It's not terribly heavy, but it is heavy enough that you really have to hold it in place while you're doing this. And that's it. Up and down, super easy, just a couple of seconds. Okay, so now let me shift to a different view, and then you can get a better look at different parts. So a couple of things in how I built this. I made a lot of mistakes, I gotta tell you. I followed a couple of videos, and like I said, I'm gonna link both of those videos to the description down below this tutorial, but I wanna point out a couple of things. One, I believe they're 2 or 2.5 inch casters on the bottom. The height of your casters is going to affect your leg height. So a couple of things. My tabletop is actually a reused MDF. There's a lot of the descriptions that just say get a 4 by 8 foot sheet of plywood. The problem with plywood is it tends to splinter, I find, and you have to sand down the top. I like the MDF because it's already smooth. It has a tendency to crack along the edges, but the top of it is already smooth wood, so you don't really have to worry about getting splinters in your fingers and stuff. I already had this in the house. I had 3 2 foot by 40 inch sheets, so I just put them together, and so that gave me a 6 foot table that's 40 inches wide, which is more than enough space that I need. I think a 4 foot by 8 foot table in this space that I've got would probably be way too big and bulky. I used 2x4s. I think I ended up using 8 2x4s in the whole construction of this entire project, including the piece that's mounted to the wall to hold the whole thing up. And I've still got a couple of pieces left over. So it's not a full 8 feet, but because of the sizing, it made it. So since my top board was 40 inches, I made my 2x4, my cross, 36 inches, because I wanted a few inches on the side to be able to attach clamps. Whenever I was working on the side of projects, or if I got something hanging off the edge, I want to be able to attach clamps. So I left myself an overhang. Some of the tutorials don't leave enough of an overhang. They leave like 1/2 inch or 1 inch, and I don't find that's enough to hold down clamps. So I would recommend at least a 2 to 3 inch gap. Since I knew I was making it exactly 3 feet, and I bought all my 2x4s were 8 feet long, I just made my length 5 feet. So this way I only had to make 1 cut on each of my 2x4s. So 1, 2 is one board, and then 3, 4 is one other board. So that gave me my 36 inches and then 5 feet, 60 inches across. So that being my frame, I laid my MDFs down on top of it and then screwed them all into place with like 1,000 screws. When you're doing this, you need a box of 3 inch screws and a box of 2 inch screws. I used most of the box of the 3 inch screws. I used, some of the 2 inch screws, and I'll show you where I use the 2 inch screws. Opening it up, my MDF was bowing in the middle because this used to be part of a bunk bed, so it had a curve to it. So I mounted one more piece of 2x4 on the inside. Again, by using a nice even measurement, just made another one of these. So, and then I laid it flat, and that gave me a nice flat surface to screw into from the top. And this is the board that I use 2-inch screws. I put 2 screws on each end of this to hold it in place, flip the whole thing over, and then screw down the center all the way down. Now, the legs are really interesting. So there's a couple of things about the legs. Number one is, I'm not sure if you can see it from this angle, you probably can't, but these are not straight 2x4s on the edges. They are cut down. And so what I did was, this is a carriage bolt that's on the center here, and it goes all the way through. So what I did was I cut 2 boards, and this is where I made a mistake because I was using multiple tutorials. So I originally cut my legs to be 30 inches, but forgot to add the fact that I was going to add casters, number one, and number two, that the original plans that I got this from was for an 8-foot piece. Mine's only a 6-foot piece. So that really changed my height. So the length of your leg is going to depend on how tall you want your table to be. So between my leg, my half inch of board, and my 2.5 inches of caster that's on the bottom, I think it's a 2-inch wheel plus a ½ inch. So my legs are 27 inches, and they are, and then I have the 2.5 inches and another ½ inch. So that brings my board to right around between 30 and 31 inches when it's all said and done. So what I did for the legs was I left about 1 inch flat on the top, and I cut 45-degree angles and on each of them. And when I did that, it allows it to swing pretty smoothly front to back. You'll see on some of the tutorials, they'll sand it into a curve. I just didn't feel like pulling out the sander, and so I just got lazy. So one of the tutorials says you just cut 45-degree angles. I did the same thing. I left about 1 inch on the top and just went 45, 45 using my speed square, and that was it. That's the way I made it work. This board is awesome because this piece of 2x4 is what keeps the legs from bending too far in the wrong direction, and these two keep them going, keep the legs straight for you. You'll see that the legs are 2 2x4s that are screwed together 4 times, and then there's a carriage bolt that helps them swing. Spider just went into my face. Now, on some of the tutorials, what you'll see is you'll see that they notched the leg and then indent and then put the 2x4 in the notch. That was way more work than I wanted to do. So again, I tried to keep things as simple as possible. So this is 36 inches, this is 36 inches. They're the exact same length as the cross piece of my frame because everything was nice and easy cutting it at 36 inches. It was just zing, zing, zing all the way down. So I mounted it. I don't feel like it takes away anything by not being in bed, by not sitting flush inside of it. Since this one was already going to be sticking out, I felt like, what's the big deal if this one was sticking out too? So that's just the way I ran it. As you can see, I put plenty of screws all over the place because I didn't want anything to move. This thing is rock solid. I could jump it up and down on this, and I don't think well, maybe not jump, but I could definitely lay out on this with no problem, and I'm 185 pounds. So it can easily hold my weight plus probably a lot more when it's all said and done. Also, you'll notice the casters. The casters that are on here are going to be dependent on how tall you want this to be, the surface you're working on. My garage is nice and sealed, so I have no issues. My driveway is brand new, so it's fairly smooth. So I felt like these 2-inch casters were perfect. When I originally did this, I was not thinking, and I used one of the tutorials, and it said to make the legs 30 inches. I made my legs 30 inches, and the legs hit each other as they came across, and I hadn't even added the casters yet. So and this was already all mounted together, so I had to cut the legs off shorter by 3 inches to make everything fit in there. And you can see I have not quite a finger's width in between my legs, and it works perfectly. Okay, let's talk about this crossbar. So, learn the hard way. This cross piece, for me, sits right there. I did notch, as you can see, one piece out of each one notch end, and that's just so it sits nice and smooth on there. You'll see some of the tutorials will also notch in the leg so that it sits flush inside the leg. Again, that was way more work than I wanted to do, and so mine works perfectly. It sits low when I take it off. That keeps the legs from folding in on themselves when you bring the table down and when you move it around. So this is absolutely a necessity unless you have some sort of other cross that something that I don't know, ratchets in place and hold the legs in place. But this was super important to this whole design of making sure that this piece was here. So whether you decide to notch in the legs for it to sit flush like you'll see in the tutorials, or you decide to go with something like this, what I do is when I pull this down, this goes into place first. I unlatch this, and I'll talk about this whole this piece in a second. When I bring it down, I then slide this to the middle position, up like this, so just so it's a little sturdier. But that's it, and it sits pretty flush when I do that. It's pretty firm. This piece here is super simple. This is one of the tutorials recommended getting. He used 1x4s in this cross piece here, and I was like, hey, that sounds like great. But then I just said, I already have the 2x4, so maybe I can return the 1x4. But then I decided to cut the 1x4 down so that it would mount to the wall, just so that it's a little bit closer in thickness to the tabletop. So all I did was cut that to be about 33, 34 inches. I think it was 34 inches. And that puts it directly between two distant studs. The studs are about 16 inches apart in my garage. So I just screwed them into the studs and then hit it with two more sets of anchors behind that, just because I want to make sure that this thing did not come down. This piece of wood is pretty cool. It's, as you can see, it just turns. What I did was drilled a hole through both, started my screw, put a washer on the inside between the two pieces of wood, and that prevents the two pieces of wood from rubbing up against each other, and that's what allows that to spin. So maybe later I will put like a bolt in there instead of a screw, but right now my screw's working pretty well, and you can see it spins back and forth. I did have to put a down arrow to remind me which side of the wood has to point down. I first did this, and when I mounted it, I didn't mount it properly, and it blocked the table from going up. So the table would get blocked. So I had to take everything down, remount this, and rescrew it. So if I do it this direction, it doesn't hold as strongly. So I find that this sticks down just a little bit more than the other side does, and so it holds up nicely. When you're storing it all together, you'll see some of them, they'll store their wood on the inside. Mine happens to fit perfectly if I just slide it up on top. This piece comes in. I did decide to go with a locking caster for one set so that the table can't roll around on me. Oh, I want to point out one other thing, and you can't quite see it, but I'm going to try and zoom you in as close as you can. I had to use shims, which in this case are paint sticks. So this was the first leg that I mounted, and it looked great. And this is the second leg I mounted, and I did it slightly differently, and I thought I had the measurements right, and this one came out perfect, and then that one had a gap. And so what happened was it caused there to be a gap in between my boards, so my board wasn't level going across. So what I did to fix that problem moving forward so that I wouldn't keep duplicating that issue was I actually took I had an extra paint stick, and I put the paint stick flush against my tabletop, because this is all built upside down. Put it down and then put the leg on top of it, and made sure that the leg was, my leg was 90 degrees with my speed square. When that was in place, then I took my drill and drilled through for the carriage, for the hole, for the carriage bolt, and then locked everything into place, and then used a ratchet a socket wrench to tighten everything in place. So that was an easy fix of just taking a paint stick and using it like a shim, putting it down, and that guaranteed that I had exactly the right amount of space to allow this to swing with no issues whatsoever and not rub up against my table. If you don't do that, you're probably going to have to round everything off using a sander, so just be aware. The whole project said and done, I would say, and again, this is all going to depend on the type of materials you use, but it cost me about $65. I think a sheet of plywood was another $16. So it would probably cost you somewhere around $75, depending on how you do this, like how many boards you use, what type of wood you use, how many screws you buy, all of that kind of stuff, kind of bolts. There's a lot of changes and things you could do differently. So if you have any suggestions about how if you do yours and you have a different tutorial and you post it, great, tag me and let me know how yours came out. So I hope you enjoy my project, and I love it. It's absolutely fantastic, and I've got a couple projects planned for today, so I'm going to get this started. Have a great day, beautiful people.